Last year sometime, a congregant of mine asked me to preach a sermon on what all the world religions have in common. Now that question itself brought to mind the perennial philosophy. Some of you may have heard of that. It's a concept that all religious traditions share one metaphysical truth. That truth is sometimes described as the ground of being or the divine spirit from which all religious truths spring. Houston Smith, a 20th century religious scholar who wrote a very popular book on world religions, was a proponent of this idea. I know that he was affiliated with this congregation during his time in Berkeley. Smith said, differences in culture, history, geography, collective temperament all make for diverse starting points. But beyond these differences, the same goal beckons. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi said, belief in one God is the cornerstone of all religions. So it is toward this one God that all religious people are climbing. Some of our greatest religions from Eastern wisdom have a slightly modified version of this idea. They say that rather than seeking the same God, it's the ethical goals of religion that are similar. As we heard Thich Nhat Hanh say, we have different roots, traditions, ways of seeing, but we have common qualities of love, understanding, and acceptance. However, religious scholar Stephen Prothero is having none of this. As you heard in the reading that Don shared, Prothero said the idea that all religions are the same at their core is a lovely statement, but is dangerous, disrespectful, and untrue. He said that for more than a generation, we have followed scholars and sages down the rabbit hole into a fantasy world in which all gods are one. So how do we parse these differing perspectives? In our globally connected world, religious strife is very real. And a dream of harmony and interconnection is a wonderful aspiration, but so far has not been proven to be sufficient to navigate the challenges of religious difference. So I want to start our exploration this morning by taking a giant step backwards and try to wrap our arms around the similarities and differences of the world religions. And for this, we have to go way back, about 40,000 years. Humans first developed religious ideas in order to make sense of life, of suffering, of death. About 40,000 years ago, humans developed the ability to think abstractly. And with that came music, art, storytelling, ritual, and religion. Myths and religious practices and moral practices help build community and minimize strife. Religion was central to pre-modern culture. Humans formed clans that had their own religious practices, generally based on the cycles of Earth, connection to nature, and developing and establishing group norms of behavior. And everyone understood and generally adhered to them. They were a part of everyday life. Urbanization changed all that. For the first time, people with different religious practices came together, and the clan structure was coming apart. This happened about 3,000 years before the Common Era, a time of one of the greatest transformations in human history. Life in the city-state evoked a crisis of meaning as the clan structure gave way to a new emphasis on the individual. And the challenging conditions of life forced these early humans to deal with questions about why was there suffering, or injustice, or evil, or death. You can find answers to these questions in many of the legends and myths that were created by these early civilizations. And it is at the same time in history that the major world religions found their roots in the three centers of ancient civilization: India, China, and the Middle East. And out of the roots that were planted at that time, the world religions that we know today came to fullness. The next greatest shifts for humans began with the dawn of the modern era, beginning in the 16th century, characterized by wide-ranging intellectual, political, and economic change. For religion, an even more significant change came during the Enlightenment period in the late modern era, when science began to dominate and replaced religion as a source of knowledge. Religion was no longer the center of political, social, economic, and religion began to be seen as a matter of individual faith or belief. This culminated in the separation of church and state. The founding fathers used European philosophy to develop the idea. Finally, with globalization, colonialism, and mass migration, we moved into a postmodern period of religion and human culture, a pluralistic world where no one religion dominates. In this era, more and more people choose to disavow religious practice of any kind, and the belief in the unquestioned power of science has been diminished, and we are questioning reality. We are questioning truth. Voices from the margins in our world have contributed to this shift, and those of us in the dominant culture are realizing that things never really were the way that we thought they were. This is the world we live in now, this postmodern era. And there are more ways to be religious than ever, or not. And though there is much less religious warfare than in pre-modern times, we still have a long path of mutual respect and understanding to walk before we achieve the vision of all religions living together harmoniously. So I'm going to change direction now, and I'm going to shift from this linear chronological math of history to frame a little bit on how each major religion differs in their foundational ideas. The three families of religion that emerged from India, Middle East, and China all perceived a different source of truth and a different problem that religion needed to solve. For the East Asian religions, the source of truth was the interconnection of all. The Tao and disharmony was the problem. Religious practice that helped them get back into connection with nature, or for the Taoists with nature, or getting into connection with society for the Confucianists. So for the Chinese origins, their source of truth was the interconnection. And they felt that when you got out of harmony was when the problems started. In South Asia, Hindu practices evolved from the idea that we are all part of one divine spirit, one part of Brahman. But we saw ourselves as separate from this spirit. So the religious problem was suffering and separation. And the solution were various practices that they call yoga, far more complex and broad than the yoga we know in the West. And this yoga would help the soul be freed from the cycles of birth and suffering. Then in the Middle East, monotheism emerged with the single God as the source of meaning and truth. The religious problem was sin and separation from this God. And the solution was following the commandments and building towards the kingdom of God. So what was the end game for these religions? Where did they see us heading? For the monotheistic religions, they share a view that we are moving towards an end time where all the righteous will be united with God. For Eastern religions, their goal is achieving nirvana, connection with the greater spirit, But they believe that it all exists right now, and through our efforts, we can find our way there. So these three roots establish many branches. Hinduism gave birth to Buddhism and Sikhism. Islam and Christianity emerged from Judaism. And as we know in our world today, these religions have many branches, many forms of Christianity, Islam, Hinduism. Throughout history, there has been much religious strife between these groups. You know, Muslims against Hindus, Christians against Muslims, Christians against Jews. Every combo you can think of are fighting each other. Or in many cases, the dominant religion was oppressing the others, such as the Christian treatment of Jews in Europe. But some of the deepest strife among religions is between those that are the most closely related, especially when one considers itself to be the successor to the other, the improvement of the other. Think of the Shiites and the Sunni in Iran, both arising from the same root, or the Catholics and the Protestants in the Middle Ages, or Christians and Muslims, Christians and Jews, all arising from the Abrahamic faith and all seeing themselves as the one true religion that God intended. Religious strife feeds directly from religious fervor. I'm sure you've heard of the idea of exceptionalism. It means that you believe that yours is the one true faith. This idea can lead to thinking that not only is your religion correct, the one that God intended, but that other religions are wrong or perhaps even evil. Now, so far I haven't said anything about indigenous religions, such as the Native American or traditional African or those among the Pacific Islanders or other places in the world. These are the descendants of the early tribal religions that have passed down fundamentally unchanged. Our dominant culture has always labeled and treated these religions as primitive. And yet, as we enter a chaotic time in our world, many people are now turning to these ancient wisdom to navigate our postmodern world. Okay, you still with me? Everybody doing okay so far? All right, I get a thumbs up. So the world turns and we enter this postmodern era. And the world's religions are breaking into factions that represent the needs of their adherents to navigate this interrelated, complex world. There are changes that are happening in similar ways across most religions. So I want to outline some of these main categories. First is the fundamentalists, something in all religions. They reject important aspects of modern culture, and they want to go back to what they perceive as the purity of religion and social order. This is not just a Christian trend. There are fundamentalists in all major religions. Right now in India, there are a group of Hindu nationalists that are trying to take over the country, sort of like the Christian nationalists in our country. Other religious communities are choosing to stay firmly as modernists. They want to accommodate their religious tradition to the social and political realities of modern life, such as choosing to ordain women or LGBTQ clergy. And then there are the postmodern religionists. These folks are fully swimming in the soup of our era, holding on to their core beliefs while striving to orient their practices to our global and shifting reality. These postmodern religionists are learning to tolerate discomfort and learning to live with uncertainty. And of course, the worldwide trauma reinforced all these divisions. So let's come to Unitarian Universalism. Where do we fit in this framework? Well, it depends on who you talk to. Right now, all three of these attitudes are present in our denomination. There's a fundamentalist group among us that wants to take us back to the good old days. Of course, you always ask, for who were they the good old days? And they've even started their own association now. We have people who are comfortable with how we are now. They like our current religious practices and structure, and they don't really want to change very much. And then, of course, there are those who feel the imperative for change, to respond to the turmoil of our times and to respond to the call for justice and inclusion with full engagement. So as Unitarian Universalists, we are a little microcosm of the current challenges faced by all the world religions. And there is strife among us. So I ask you, if there are challenges within UU, how can people of different religious views get along? I'm very inspired by one of the values in our proposed Article 2 revisions that speaks to this very topic. And one of those values is pluralism. Pluralism is the coexistence of a variety of perspectives and ideas, but it's so much more. There's a project at Harvard Divinity School that expanded this definition. They say pluralism is not diversity alone, but the energetic engagement with diversity. Pluralism is not just tolerance, but the active seeking of understanding across lines of difference. In our current configuration, as Unitarian Universalists, we are actually a laboratory for pluralism. We can practice these ideas right here each time we come together, for we have a tremendous variety of beliefs and practices among us. I offer a new member class once a quarter at my congregation, and we do this exercise where everyone lines up according to what their thoughts are about God. So if you're all in about God, you're at that side, and if no way, there's no God, you're on that side. And it is amazing to see the diversity along that line. Similarly, every Sunday when we use religious language in a prayer, someone is taking those words in with a sense of homecoming and rapture. And someone, possibly right next to them, is working on their shopping list for the grocery stop after the service that day. How are we doing in engaging with understanding and appreciation of our religious diversity? As UUs, we are also in a relationship with many of the world's religions through our personal study and practice. There are many UU Buddhists, Christians, Jews, Taoists, Hindu, Muslims, pagans, and many others. As UUs, we practice pluralism, keeping our minds open and challenging our assumptions and prejudices. And we do this pretty well, of course, with the exception of Christianity. Because many of us have had negative experiences with Christianity, we tend not to bring an open-hearted spirit to appreciating what the Christian message may offer. We also tend a wee bit to exceptionalism, thinking that our religion is better than anyone else's. And I hope you think that UU is best for you. But I also hope that you're open to understanding that other people's religions can be equally true and meaningful for them. We're a small denomination, but are mighty in vision. We have this chance to model pluralism in our lives and our interaction. I want to read to you the language of the value of pluralism in the Article 2 proposal. It says, we celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. So now I come full circle back to where we began. Do the world religions have more in common than not? Is there a path to peace in our world? I think I'm going to go with the Dalai Lama on this one. I think that all the various religions are infused with love. Love in all its forms, in all its power. Love that can heal, unite, and enrich us, and build connections among all the various religious ideas. But I also want to draw inspiration from the Hindu theology that peace and love are not something that will be coming, but something that's here right now. If we know it, if we believe it, if we live it, may it be so.